Hey, this is your host, Rick Houston. Before we get down to business in this week's episode, how about hitting those subscribe, like, and notification buttons? With all that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Well, Gary, just to get started with, you got your start in drag racing back in the 70s. How did that come about?
Well, my first job when I was old enough to work was working at a Dodge dealership in High Point, Bilderton Dodge. And I got to meet some local racers around there and got hanging out with them and decided that's what I wanted to do. And I eventually over the years got into it, you know, and never was worth a darn at it, but I really enjoyed doing it. And but I did that up to, I guess, 1979, 1980.
Okay.
And I went in my little office. I had a shop there. And I built other people's drag cars and stuff. Some pro stock cars, did some top fuel work, stuff like that. I could TIG weld. I was a fabricator,
right?
And that really paid the bills. So I went in the shop one day and opened up my desk, my little desk drawer, my little closet shop office, and I had some checks in there that was returned from people that I did work for, and I couldn't get paid. I had like $20,000 in checks that in my drawer that I couldn't collect. And I said, well, I need a job. So that's when I met Terry. Our shop was close to Hagan Enterprises. Terry brought some radiators and some oil tanks and stuff over. And back then, it wasn't that many people around that actually would TIG weld Heliarc aluminum. And I met Terry, did some of the repair work and stuff like that. And then I guess 1980 was when I actually said, well, I guess Terry talked me into coming over to Hagan. And I said, I'll only do it part-time because I got so many jobs I had to finish in my shop.
Now you're talking about drag racing?
Drag racing jobs. And it was a few round track jobs that I was doing also. I think one of the major jobs was right there at the end was, and Terry was involved in it, and but Tex Powell was involved in that program too. They were building 2 Camaro cars to take to Le Mans, France, and I don't think they were for Billy. I think they were for I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I know Tex Powell was ramrodding the thing, and I got one of the cars to finish and put the body on it because I was doing a lot of fiberglass and pro stock type body stuff on cars. And so they liked what they saw, so they wanted me to put the bodies and all on the cars. But that's kind of how I got into working on round track stuff. Plus, I knew Petty's very well. I met all the Petty's. Didn't live very far from them, so never did no work for them or any work for them. But that's kind of how I got in.
Now, when you first started out drag racing, how old were you?
I was in kindergarten. I guess I was probably had to be in my 20s, early 20s, real early 20s.
All right, was the drag racing legal?
Yeah, it was. It was IHRA mostly, and some NHRA, super stock mostly, with the old Max Wedge cars and the Hemi cars, the early super stock stuff. That's what I kind of grew up with. And I did that all through, I guess, the 70s. Never was very successful at it, but had a good time. And the cars were good, but I wasn't. So, anyway, I just felt like I needed to just do something a little different.
Was it a hard decision to move from drag racing that you had known for so long to
NASCAR with Terry and Billy?
Yeah, it was. I partnered up with a guy, Mike Kennedy, in the late 70s, and we had a pretty successful deal going in drag racing. We raced modifieds, super stocks, modifieds, and we started building some pro stock cars. And he's dead now, but he God rest his soul. But he taught me a lot, and that, I think, me having to walk away from that at that time because I didn't have enough money in my drawer.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big factor in me going into NASCAR type racing. Me doing so much racing work for the teams around that area at that time. I said, well, maybe I need to get into it. It was starting to be a big thing. Terry was he was instrumental in getting me to come over there.
Yeah. Were you with the team when Terry got that first win at Charlie?
I was, yeah.
What do you remember about that?
Man, I tell you what, we had some good guys working over there. We didn't have that many of us, and it was a small shop. You've probably been up there to that little shop. It was a small shop. I got to work with people like Steve Meal and Bob Labonte, but I got to work with and then Dale Emmon, and me going from working part time at first over there, I was working with Jake Elder, and then now that was a trip.
I was actually going to ask about Jake.
Jake, he was a trip. I really enjoyed working with him, and he's very smart, really. But his biggest thing is his bark is a whole lot worse than his bite. But he was a great guy to work with. He taught me a lot. So
all right, so you kind of dangle that carrot out.
Yeah,
what's your best Jake Elder story that would describe what it would be like to work with you?
Oh, man. I guess probably my best is, without saying anything bad, I guess one day everybody was having a rough day that day. And I went to, we were doing something. I don't remember what it was. But anyway, Jake come over and he barked at me a little bit. You know how Jake is. Jake, he don't mean any harm. He's just that way. And and so I said, well, I need a little bit of a break here. So I went in the back and walked out on the loading dock, and I was just sitting down on some tires during work hours, just sitting down out there. And I was basically having a soda and cooling down just a little bit because he got under my collar a little bit. And he gets under everybody's collar a little bit, but I love him to death. But I remember he come out there and he would always call me Welder Boy. He didn't even know my name. He would call me Welder Boy. I'm sure he probably knew my name.
Yeah.
He called me Welder Boy because that's all I did was pretty much weld this, weld that, whatever. And he said, "Welder Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I looked at him, and I remember looking at him, and I said, "Jake, you need to go back into the shop because you're getting ready to get your butt whipped." I remember telling him that, and he said, "I didn't mean to ruffle your feathers," but he said, "Come on back in when you get through drinking your drink." So that was a good story for me. But anyway, and years later, we were the best friends, and we did good. But I guess that was before we won the championship. Dale was there when we won the championship. I'm sorry. That's when I went full time there. When Dale come to Hendrick or to Hagan. From Petty.
Okay.
Remember that year year or two that Dale set out down Petty's.
So you started out part time.
Yeah. And then when Dale come there,
right,
I was to the point to where I could go full time. So I went full time for I guess about 2 years there. And I was there in '84 when we won the championship.
Now, when you were part time, were you still doing the drag racing stuff?
No.
Okay.
Well, I was trying to finish up the things that I had started.
Okay.
You just can't just
Right.
like you just can't tear the sheet of paper away. You got to work on it and make sure everybody's happy. I always wanted to make sure everything was done and everybody got what they paid for, and that's why I was still drag racing. I wasn't so much drag racing as I was building the cars, because I was backlogged a little bit, but I wanted to do the NASCAR thing, so that's why I did. I'd give Hagan half a day, and then I'd work the other half a day at my shop. So
you were trying to give them what they paid for, or what they bounced checks for.
Well, the ones that bounced the checks, they didn't get any more work. Just put it that way. But that was one of the factors that I was dealing with. I didn't have enough money. I had some bounced checks. I just couldn't. I felt like, the other thing too is I was married, and everybody goes through the minivan thing when they grow up, I guess. So I felt like I needed something a little safer for my kids to ride around in. And I went to the dealership, and be honest with you, I could not even buy a new vehicle. The bank would not even finance me because I didn't make enough money. I had credit, I just didn't make enough money. So they were being reluctant about that, wanting to put me on a high interest rate and stuff like that. And I said, well, right now, that was another decision that I said, well, I'll just go to work for somebody and everybody be happy.